Technology to how to find the job in this current climate. I'm your host, Jada, and every week I'll be sitting down with leaders in the field who are shaping the future of human resources through technology. We're going to discuss trends, hot topics, and best practices to not only land that job, but be successful in it. So, whether you're the ones hiring or looking to be hired, you're in the right place for tips and ideas. Now, sit back, relax, grab your drink of choice, and let's get into it. This is From the Desk with Jada Montemorano, where we bring the hottest HR news from the desk right to you. And our guest today is Ben Eubanks, a renowned speaker, author, and researcher who's been shaping the HR and talent landscape for over a decade. As the Chief Research Officer at Lighthouse Research and Advisory, Ben works with global leaders to navigate the ever-evolving intersection of people and technology. He's also the author of Artificial Intelligence for HR, a game-changing guide on how AI can transform the workplace. He's also the founder of Upstart HR, a blog that's impacted over 1 million business leaders. So from speaking on virtual and physical stages to hosting a podcast, Ben's mission is simple: to make HR better one pro at a time. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ben. Awesome. So we talked about all of your experience through all of your research and direct work with vendors and companies. I guess let's start off simple. Why is tech so important in the HR space right now?
I think the big thing is that most HR leaders have this vision in their head of what great looks like. And they'd love to get there, but they're always busy just churning away at all the stuff that gets put in their way. All the things added to their to-do list. Like, I've got to investigate this issue. I've got to look at those 40 resumes. And it just piles up. And the technology helps them cut through that and get to the real work that actually adds meaning for them and for the workforce.
And when we speak about this technology, a lot of it now is focused on AI, so much so you wrote a whole book on it, right? So, what have you noticed in your research that made you write this book about AI having an impact on the industry?
The real value that AI brings is it gives us a way to personalize what we're doing. So when I worked as an HR leader years ago, the thing that meant the most to me was when I could see someone that needed a specific thing and could give that to them in the moment. Whether it's a help with a benefit, it was help with a tough situation with their manager, it was whatever it happened to be, right? Being able to step in and do that. In a perfect world, every HR leader would have plenty of time to go do that, or they'd have managers that are equipped and proactive and motivated enough to do that themselves. But we don't live in the land of Skittles and unicorns and rainbows. We live in the real world, and it's hard to do that. And so AI helps us do those things. It helps personalize our service, tailor how we're supporting people, helps us see every candidate for what they bring in the hiring process and serve them well, create a candidate experience that lets them put their best foot forward and be evaluated on that, not based on their name or their age or their gender or other things that are beyond their control. That's the real opportunity that AI affords us.
And it's so funny when you say that you use the word personalize and you think
Yes.
about personal with a person, right? You don't think AI is going to be able to do that. So, can you explain for people out there who may be
Mhm.
nervous about AI coming into other spaces of how it does make it personal when the human is still there, right? But there's this
I know.
AI in between.
It is a huge paradox, Shada, right? It feels like, how is this possible? So, the thing that I have said for a long time, there was actually a headline in the news not too long ago that said job hunting in the age of AI is grim and dehumanizing. And that happens when a company is using tools like AI and others to keep people at arm's length. I just want to keep you away from me and do my own task and process and just keep you away. But companies that say, how do we know these candidates better? How do we know what matters to them? Let's ask deeper questions. Let's use some assessment. Let's them try the job out before they actually potentially take the job. Let's do those sorts of things and use those to get the most out of that person. Those are examples of personalizing and tailoring because that person gets to be evaluated based on what they actually can do, not based on other things like how well they wrote their resume or how well they had ChatGPT write the resume. Those sorts of things don't tell you how great someone's going to be. And the research has shown that this isn't new. Decades of data tell us don't use a GPA, don't just use a resume, don't use this unstructured, chatty interview. Use a real process. And yet companies still sort of fall back on that, and hiring managers do too. So it helps us to get to those things and really see people. I'll give you a quick example of something that just kind of blows my mind. So most of us have used a chat bot to interact with the cable company, your cell phone company, whatever else. When the hiring process, when candidates interact with a chat bot, strangely enough, they know it's not a person, but 75% of them say thank you at the end of that interaction to a bot. Why? Because it feels fundamentally different. It's hard to quantify the feeling, But after most of us finish applying for a job, you want to throw your computer out the window because it was so terrible experience. So something about that feeling, that sense of being heard and acknowledged matters to candidates. And that's what I mean when I say personalized.
So AI is at that space now where it can be a little bit more personal. And then does it move on to having those human interactions as well in the hiring process? You think there should
Mhm.
be a little bit of both?
Yes, absolutely. So what's wild is when we actually survey the workforce, we surveyed thousands of workers and candidates in the last 2 years, as well as thousands of employers on a global scale. And you may think that, well, candidates are like, no, don't use that at all. And employers are gung ho about it. And the truth is that both parties are actually pretty good with it early in the process. Details about the job, matching me to something that fits my skills, all those things, we're okay with that. The closer we get to that offer point, though, the point where, hey, Jada, I want you to come work with our company, and you're never going to get that part of your life back. So commit now. Like that moment, the more we as HR leaders and recruiters want a human in the mix, just to make sure. And the more the candidates do too. They want to make sure they're not just joining a company that can put them through a process, but one that truly cares about who they are. And so both parties have that same sense of, hey, it's okay early on, but the more we get to an actual commitment, we more want a human in the mix. And the data seem to reflect that there's an opportunity there. We ask candidates the number one way they want companies to use AI. We actually ask them, they want companies to use AI in the hiring process is to help match them to a job that fits their skills best. Because they may have found this job on your website, but you have 3 other ones that are better fits they don't know about yet. They didn't see them. They just saw this job ad. So helping them when they perceive that help outweighs whatever the cost is of using AI, of that automation, that lack of touch, the more they're willing to lean in and say yes.
Amazing. And you talk a lot about these positives. Are there any negatives so far that you've noticed in implementing AI into the HR world?
Every single one of us has heard about bias, has heard about the risk of making poor decisions. And the thing that I'm very careful about, number one, this the advent of AI technology does not change the responsibility that HR and talent leaders have to be the bias experts in the business. You had to do that 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. You have to do that today. You have to be the expert and be watching out for your people, period. That said, what's really incredible to me is that right now, somewhere in the world, someone's hearing this and they talked to a manager this week that said, yeah, I'm not going to pick that person because they didn't feel right. And we know that's code for something, but we can't audit that manager's brain. We can't see what they're thinking. But when AI makes that same decision, oh yeah, it's not going to pick Jada, but it picks Ben. Why? We can audit the decision and say, oh look, it thought that men were better, and so we're gonna evaluate that and change that. So the benefit of AI, even if it makes a biased decision, is we can audit it, see it, and potentially change it going forward, influence those signals it's using. But if we're just saying let's no avoid that, just do human powered, those managers who are still making those decisions based on what feels right to them, which is code for they don't look like me, they don't sound like me. Those managers are going to keep doing what they've always done.
So, for a lot of people right now in this current climate with getting jobs, it's been a little bit difficult for everyone. And a lot of people are saying that they feel like it's just going out into the void, their applications. Are
Mhm.
you saying that AI is at least helping that a little bit? You're not seeing major negatives in at least that space right now.
My goodness. So that opens a whole other conversation around this, honestly, because we're seeing more and more candidates that are using AI tools, whether it's to apply for jobs, is to help them rewrite their resume, is to help them fake the interview, the video interview, like all these different ways that candidates are using AI too in the process. And it's hard to fault them because for years, employers said, hey, look at this great new tool we have. You can apply online. We'll never talk to you, but you can apply online. Go for it. And so it's created this black hole, which gives this drive for candidates to need to fight back, to sort of find a way around it, to circumvent the process. And so employers, technically, the AI should be helping us do those things. And I know in many companies, I've seen incredible stories and case studies of it helping pick the right people, helping to balance the scales from a fairness perspective, do all the right things. But at the same time, there are still plenty of candidates out there that are getting no response when the tools all have easy ways to provide responses back, to communicate with people. So it's a real challenge. The best thing is the best examples I'm seeing some of the technologies aren't just to serve the employers and to make their process faster, but they're made to help the candidates out. The example I gave earlier, where it says, hey, Jada, you applied for this job, you're a 70% fit, and there are already 10 applicants that are a 90% fit or above. You can, but that's probably low probability you're going to get it. But this job over here, you're an 80% fit for it and it only has one other applicant. Do you want to apply for that one too? Well, anyone with their rational mind would say, yes, absolutely. But only AI tools are going to show us those kinds of insights as candidates. So there are ways they can help, but at the same time, it doesn't solve for a company's inattention, lack of resourcing, or just lack of interest in being responsive to candidates. The ones that are doing that, it's going to cost them long term.
And with a lot of AI that we're talking about, of a lot of the help that we're seeing in there, are there any other technologies right now that are helping the HR world that we could discuss, or is it mainly the focus on AI right now?
Oh my goodness. Again, we could talk about anything into the employee experience as well, beyond just the hiring side of that. There are some things you'd expect, like which employees are likely to quit. We can do retention prediction using a bunch of different signals. There are in other areas that are less exciting in some ways from the outside, but within the HR bubble, it's incredible. Like you think about workers' compensation is the least exciting part of the work that HR does. And there are new tools that can use computer vision to look at a workplace and identify potential safety hazards before someone's injured or, you know, goodness, even killed on the job. These tools can help to identify safety indicators, those flags, those potential areas, and protect the workforce. So there are some areas where we're seeing AI being used in ways to, again, to help see people, to help understand what they need, and to help take care of them at a level that humans simply can't.
That is so interesting. You never think about tech being used in that way in
Mhm.
areas like workers' comp. So, with all of these emerging technologies, and you're explaining there's so much data that these
Mhm.
professionals can be using, whether it's to hire or when people already have the job in the HR space, are people getting overwhelmed by it? Is it a learning curve for these professionals to learn all of these new tools? What have you been seeing in that way of how it's actually being implemented by the humans in these jobs?
Well, let me start with the workers' comp example because that's a fun one. It's one of those things where you may see that and think, yeah, but does the AI really do a good job? Does it do as good as I would as an HR professional? And what's wild is when they come in and implement one of those systems, they take someone on the job, they take one of those HR leaders and say, okay, you go train the algorithm. You know what to look for. You're the expert on your workplace. You are the foremost expert on what it takes to work safely here. You teach the algorithm what to look for, and it will do that for you so you can do other work that matters to you. That's the thing that's really, really thrilling is it takes that expertise, that insight from someone, and then it does it 24/7 without having to take a break, without having to take time off. The HR leaders that are putting tools like that and others into place, there's absolutely a learning curve. There's misinformation. There's all kinds of stuff out there where they're worried about it, or they hear, oh, ChatGPT, and that's the only place they think about. But AI in the workplace has platform applications, like we've talked about within the job search process, everything else. But then there are applications where you get to use this as an individual and you can use it to hone your work, to change how you communicate, to support the things you're doing. So there's a lot of different ways that AI is being used. And the pro of tools like ChatGPT and others is that opened the minds and opened the conversation up so more people can put their hands on it and start testing this stuff out personally and professionally. And it gave them a better insight into what AI is actually capable of.
And since a lot of these technologies are new, companies probably were not always using them. Is the onus on the companies to start using these technologies and then teaching their current workers how to use it? Like, what is that process like behind the scenes as everything continues to evolve? These HR employees that have probably been doing this for years, decades, even having to use all of these new things that maybe show up on their desk one day. What is that process behind the scenes like?
So what's really interesting is a couple of years ago there was a lot of news around AI being implemented into HR technology. When it first started, the first edition of my book came out in 2018. There's a lot of news around that, and then there was this sort of moment where everyone got worried, got nervous about the bias conversation. There were some very public stories, and so companies started being very secretive and quiet. When they got investment or were building that, they just kind of said, "Oh, it's just intelligent automation." They didn't talk about AI for a while. Then that passed by and we sort of come back around to it being cool again. But in those moments, they were building things in, and HR leaders I knew were using platforms that had AI built into the fabric of how they operated. And I'd ask them outright, "Are you using any AI?" And well, no. And I knew for a fact that they were. And so that's why we see things like legal leaders inside business, your counsel, people like that getting in the conversation to say, wait a minute, this is an AI tool. It is using our data. Is it training other companies' data? Is it training, making that available to other companies for their own queries and things? And so it's really expanded that, made it more complicated. One of the things that I've really just been intrigued by, though, is how many of these are intuitive. They're seamless. They're the way that we naturally work anyway. When I'm an HR leader looking at, for example, an employee survey that comes back, it doesn't require me to do anything extra to say access the AI stuff. It says, hey, do you want to see which one of your people are a little worried? It can use the words they're using to respond to surveys to indicate which ones are worried and maybe some ideas on how you can help take care of them. It doesn't say AI in big flashing bold, you know, text anywhere, but that's using AI powered natural language processing. So that's what you usually see is it sort of just kind of slides under the radar and it enables them to be a little bit smarter in their work day to day.
And you've been talking, or we've been talking a lot about how AI has been helping a lot of these challenges, but obviously, day to day, everything is constantly changing. So, I guess right now, where we're at, beginning of 2025, it's been a wild year already. What are the biggest challenges you are seeing in the HR space moving forward? And are there any ways to work on that, whether that's with AI or anything else? What are those current challenges we're trying to work on?
So if we had 3.5 hours, Shada, we could go through all those challenges and what they are. Really, the big thing that I am, the drum that I'm beating this year for all of our friends in HR and talent acquisition and beyond is more proactive. Be more proactive, be less reactive. So much of the work, if you ask an HR leader, is fighting fires. If you spend all your time fighting fires, you never have time to build that fire prevention plan. So you can be more proactive. You can think about what's next and you can actually plan for it. When you're reacting, very rarely is that a good situation. If you've ever been, an offender bender, your reaction is usually not a pleasant one. Okay. Even if you're okay, you're not going to be happy. And when we react to situations as HR leaders, it's going to not be our best effort, our best idea, our best thinking. And so I'm really encouraging HR leaders this year to be more proactive in how they're approaching problems and how they're thinking about the work they're doing and how they think about aligning with the business and what it needs from the people. They are, and all of you listening out there are the experts on your workforce. And if you're not being intentional about that, you'll just end up being reactive, always responding, and never really doing your best work.
And do you have an example of that for anyone? A way to be proactive? Like, how do you foresee what would happen so you can kind of get ahead of it?
So you get your magic crystal ball out, and no, that's a snow globe. You shake it. So in the new book that's coming out in March, it's called The Payroll Promise. I talk about doing this in context of how we pay our people, as an example. One of the problems, and any of you out there that are employees or candidates listening to this, if you have timesheets, fill them out. You'll make people happy. I promise you. HR leaders deal with this problem all the time about people filling out timesheets in a timely manner. And instead of saying, well, let's wait until payroll and see which ones don't do it, now you say, listen, over the last 6 pay periods, this core set of 10 employees almost always is late. So what can we do to try to encourage them to do it faster? Is there an incentive? Is there a motivation? Is there some sort of recognition? Is there a negative thing? We're going to put our list of non-compliant people on the bulletin board. What do we do? Okay, we can get creative with that and try to solve that instead of it happening again and you being irritated all over again. Let's actually plan for it because it keeps happening and we know it. Use past behavior to predict future behavior and hopefully to implement things that are going to change that future behavior for the better. Like it or not, the work of HR is like behavior change. Get people to do what they don't want to do. They spend a lot of time trying to do that, not for nefarious purposes, but because it's what the business needs. It's what someone needs to do to be able to do their job well. And that's really difficult to make that sort of behavior change happen. It's when there's a $1 billion industry for weight loss and all these other sorts of things because it's hard to change behaviors. But HR leaders that are proactive are more likely to do that than someone that's just reacting all the time.
And this is where that human aspect still comes into play, right? Because that
Hmm.
human worker knows their employees, has been watching all of this, maybe in a smaller company as well. Maybe you work next to that person that you're the HR of, right? So
Hmm.
that's where that human aspect still comes into play.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the last chapter in the book on AI is called The Human Skills of Work. And I said, okay, let's take the bait. Let's assume that all of this AI stuff is going to become even more prevalent. It's going to become a bigger part of the workforce and the workplace. What next? What you see in the research is that every time the wave of automation passes by, it strips away the things that are very repetitive. And that happened with mechanical automation over the last 150 years, digital automation over the last 15 to 20 years. When it strips away those repetitive things, it leaves behind things that are human in nature: creativity, curiosity, critical thinking, compassion, things that honestly depict a great worker in any profession. None of us wants to work with a great coder that's a really big jerk that doesn't care about people, has no compassion. We want these things in all of our workforces, and HR needs to be the one leading the pack there, developing them in the people and thinking about those. Those human skills matter more now than ever before. And the research that we're seeing across all these different sources tells us that those things are really hard for algorithms to replicate. There's a fun thing in the research called Moravic's paradox. I'm going nerdy for you on you for a second here. And Moravec came up with this when he said, listen, the things that it's really easy to teach AI, like advanced statistics and calculus. If you look at my high school grades, you'll know that I was not made to do calculus. Okay. But algorithms, it's linear. There's a right answer or a wrong answer. They're very good at that. But you try to teach an algorithm how to interact with someone, how to know the right cues, how to see when their body language shifts and know that means the person's uncomfortable. Any HR leader can do that. Many of us can do that. Even if you're not in HR, you've seen that in enough conversations and you can do that intuitively. It's hard to teach an algorithm that. So we have these human things that are an edge against the algorithms, and we need to not ignore those, but hone those and build those because those are the muscles, those are the skills that are going to carry us into the future.
And that's a good a good factor there because I think a lot of people are nervous that AI is going to replace us,
Mhm.
even in just like the sci-fi world of it all. But you're saying at least in the HR space, you still need the humans there. So that's
You
important.
still need the humans for sure, and you need the human skills across the board. AI cannot replicate those things as easily as we can produce them and use them. And if you feel like I'm not very creative or I'm not very curious, well, then build that, practice that, hone that. Don't just leave it to chance. Say I'm just not going to be good at that. No, we can lean in and say I'm going to be more compassionate on purpose, and make yourself do that. And the more you do it, the better you'll be.
And I always love ending our conversations kind of talking to the future. So today we spoke a lot about AI as the new technology that we are focusing on. But is there any other tech out there that we should be looking forward to that will help change the HR world within the
Mm.
next few years? Or is it mainly AI and just different ways of using that?
I actually talked with a company recently that had built a wearable device. And let's say we had a group coming in for onboarding. They were all coming from different backgrounds and everything else. They came together. When I got close to someone else that had a similar interest to mine, the badges would light up. And it was my cue to go and say, hey, look, you got my number on your badge. Let's find what we have in common. And that sort of thing to me is an example of how technology can reinforce that human connection, the power of that and the value of that, not leave it to chance, not just putting something in a database and saying, oh, look, here's my interest, but let's come together as real people and have a good conversation and try to find where we have common ground because more often than not, we'll find, even if we don't always believe the same things, agree on the same things, we do have common ground somewhere. And that's where we can start building from for a better relationship.
I love that. And I love that's a great way to end our episode today on that message. That was so amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
And thank you, everyone out there, for listening. You can, as always, catch us every Friday at 11 a.m. Pacific time. And if you're hungry for other Purple Acorn shows, head to purpleacornnetwork.com and Purple Acorn on LinkedIn. See you next time, right from the desk with me, Jada Montemorano.